Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day. Hello everyone and welcome to the Morning Glory. So I'm a little bit late today. Unfortunately my daughter's quite sick, so right on lunch she had a moment, so I had to run up and deal with her, but she's okay now, so all good. We've got quite a few questions. Obviously that's what we do on this show. We just answer as many questions on cricket on the session so far and go from there. So Suresh says, can a team declare without batting after the follow-on is avoided? If yes, has it ever happened before? Has it ever happened before? You can forfeit your innings. We've certainly had teams forfeit their innings before for many different reasons. It happens more in first-class cricket, Suresh, than it does in Test cricket. When essentially what happens is you get a team maybe make, I don't know, 280 to 300 in the first innings. And then both teams will forfeit the second and third innings because of rain to try and make it so that there are still points available for both teams. I can't think of many off the top of my head in Test cricket. Usually you would come out and you would bash a few more runs. Probably if it was going to have happened, it would have happened in the early 1800s when in those days there weren't, and would have to have been maybe outside of England because of the 3 days thing, where you might have had a wet wicket and you wanted someone to go back in and bat again on a wet wicket. So, you bowl a team out for 26 or something, and you might have only made 150, be like, well, the wicket's still wet, we can bowl them out again here now, would be the thinking. But it's risky and it doesn't really make any sense. You're better off to go out and make some runs if you can at that point, rather than just forfeit your innings. Someone else says, with Hoff down, will the Aussies consider giving a follow-on if India bats a session or so from here? I think they'll probably do the follow-on anyway. I should say, I'm still assuming that India will get past the follow-on amount. That wicket, obviously, of KL changes things slightly. So what do they need? About 80-odd runs. Yeah, I think the wicket's settled down now. The ball has got soft. That was a bit of a wicket against the run of play. Of course, there's no reason why, they only need another 4 wickets. But I would assume Australia's going to enforce the follow-on regardless. You might get a situation where they think to themselves, if it's close, give everyone a break for a session or half a session. But it's not like they've been bowling consistently anyway. But they'll have that conversation, and having a bowling captain will probably help with, he will probably go to himself and Mitch Starc and try and work out what those two want to do. That's what the conversation should be, right? Gaurav says, South Africa 2020. He's going through all the good times that Rahul Dravid's had. Has he been the best Indian batter? Funny that despite that he got a first game due to he only got his first game due to Rohit's paternity. The match factors over that period of time. I think we did them, Gaurav, on one of the previous shows. I mean, he's done very, very well. I remember being accused of being paid by KL at one stage by some fans, which just tells you how crazy the modern world is. That's a go-to for people these days. I think I'd have a slightly better Star Wars blanket if that was the case. So people get really. People have got unnecessarily vicious towards him. He is, in this weird position of a modern batter where he's kind of the 7th best batter. He's brought in for all these different situations. He hasn't made the runs that he should have consistently in Test cricket, but he's also struggled quite a bit of recent times when he probably has been in better form, when he's made runs, but they've been in lower scoring games, which is probably what you're also looking at as well. They were always, I think within the Indian team, they really respect him and understand his use. But like most players of that kind of, with a poorer record, who are in and out of the side, who show utility over just individual talent. I think we see the same thing over and over again. We regularly see those are the players that get attacked and abused the most by fans, and especially in India where you've got legends around them and everything else. And then he hasn't put the counting stats on, right? And so you might even be right, but without the counting stats, there's always going to be a question. Gaurav says, is Santner really looking at a different bowler post Pune? I thought he bowled even better at Hamilton than he did in Pune. I don't know if he bowled better, but yeah, I agree with you. At times when I was watching him, I thought he was bowling really well. He seems to have just worked out what he needs to do in Test cricket, for long periods of time. I remember having this conversation with Darren Goff when we were on air and we were chatting about someone had made runs, and it was whether they could play left arm finger spin. And I said to Goffey, well, he faced Mitch Santner in a Test match. And Goffey was like, well, that's like not facing anyone. And at that stage it was. Like, that's very fair. Like, we think of Mitch Santner as a quality bowler because of what he's done everywhere. But what Goffey was saying is he hasn't done anything in Test cricket. You look at the way he bowls now, and you'd be like, this is what he should have been doing for a long period of time. Oh, sorry, I've already answered that one. Rat says Jacob Bethel's record in first innings versus second innings is hilarious. Might be a bit too soon on that one, but okay. Eric says Rahul was in line for selection in the first test, batting at 5. He got to open due to Rohit's absence. Yeah, and everything that we've looked at with our numbers probably suggests that that's his best spot. And I think he technically he's one of those players who probably, because he is so well-rounded, and you look at him all the way through, there isn't really a position where he can't bat. That doesn't mean he's not going to be better at certain situations than everywhere else. So people do, people do end up exploiting that whole thing with someone like KRL, and it probably ends up not helping him. Whereas, like most batters, he's more suited to the position that works for him, right? Sam says, Jarrod, spot on with the early call that this is a new ball wicket. India's top order must be kicking themselves, especially with the Hazelwood injury. Yeah, I mean, KRL as well, like, he must have been thinking to himself, I can go on and make a big score here. So to lose out at that point. But you're right, it was, I think, if you look at the piece that we did yesterday, which, my daughter's been sick, I've probably been sick as well. It was a bit of a fever dream, that piece. But the reason I wanted to get it out there was they had a chance. And they really ballsed it up massively. And now they're going to be fighting, right, for the rest of this game in a way that they probably shouldn't have been. Losing 3 wickets for the first 100 runs on a new ball wicket, absolutely fine. Being in absolute disarray through a series of poor shots, not ideal. Akash says, could a follow-on work in India's favour with the pitch still looking flat? Make Australia bowl plenty and allow Bumrah much needed rest. Yeah, I think there's an element of Cummins and Stark could be overbowled, but I don't think they've been overbowled in this series so far. So India would have to bat really well in order to do that. People keep saying the pitch looks flat. I don't think the pitch is flat, by the way. What I think is that early on with the new ball, it's quite hard to bat against it. And then it evens out. And if you've got wickets in hand, you can cash in. So Australia had wickets in hand and India didn't have wickets in hand. So I haven't been sitting here thinking the wicket is flat. I'm seeing a lot of people saying that. There's still, I think if you still put the ball in the right area, you still have the ability to take wickets on this, which is, kind of peak Gabba. And I expect Australia, the final 4 wickets for 80 runs will be, could be touch and go either way. But yes, there is an element of, if Bumrah doesn't have to come in and bowl again, I mean, India may not even have to bowl Bumrah again anyway, realistically, because let's say it's 230 runs ahead and whatever, and Australia want to come out and belt 100, they might not even need to use someone like that as well. Where are we? AA says, with Hazelwood injured, will it force Australia to... Oh, okay, I've already answered that one, haven't I? Sorry. 1,000 Great Brooks says, I think Australia will come out and add a quick 100, 150 to the total, give some break to the bowlers, and of course have some extra runs to offset the Hazelwood issue. Yeah, I think that one would depend on what they think the wicket is going to do from here on in. If they think it is going to deteriorate, then let's say they came out and they ended up with a lead of 300 to 350, have done what you've said, then that is obviously enough runs in this situation. But they don't want to be in a situation where they run out of time. And they also don't want to be in a situation where if the wicket doesn't do anything and, I don't know, Rishabh Pant or Jaiswal goes crazy, where they could chase it. Like, they're so ahead of this game, it would be like, well, what's the... yesterday I had a look and India was 450 to 1 to win. Oh, they come down to 260 to 1. So people are probably thinking a little bit more like me of, there is a possibility that not Australia get themselves in trouble, but that you push for the win so much that you allow the opposition back in. But they will know, the Australians and the Indians will know the wicket a lot more than the rest of us will as well. Nikon says, why do you think Rahul is underrated by Indian fans? See, I don't think he's underrated. I think there's a misunderstanding of what cricketers do. Look, he's 32, and in Test match cricket, he averages 34, right? So from that point of view, I think Indian fans are automatically looking at great players of the past who average, and we had this, I just went through all this with Rahane, right? And then Rahul comes off the back of that. So I think straight away you have a look at guys in first-class cricket averaging 50, 60, 70, right? And then you've got Rahul averaging in the mid-30s. And so you, in your head, you go, well, this doesn't make any sense. And that's fine. I don't disagree. I understand that, that's why this channel exists, right? So we can explain to people more than just basic batting averages. Anyone can go to Cricinfo and find a batting average. And so I think that's where it starts, which is more than fine. I think then if you start to peel back the layers, he was supposed to be a star, and he's obviously never going to be a star. Like, he is at best, fourth, fifth, sixth best batter in the side. And, you end up that, the Shane Watson one is a perfect example of that, of like, for years, I think there was an element of Shane Watson was going to, be the next big star for Australia. And then when he wasn't the next big star for Australia, he just ends up being a normal cricketer. He ends up getting hated, despite the fact he had a pretty good he had a very good international career, but a pretty good Test career as well, right? So I think you've got that. You've then got the fact that there is, there's been weird patterns to his career. Like, as I've said before, like periods where he's gone, made no runs. There was that incredible period where he had, what was it? He only made runs against the bad teams and did make them against the good teams in one series, but everyone remembers that series because India were bad in that series, in that World Cup, I should say. Then, what was the third one that he had? Oh, and then you've got the IPL stuff, right? Where like we all saw him dominate the IPL, playing a certain way, and then he completely changed the way he played. So there's probably a feeling that he's a little bit selfish, that he's a little bit more negative than he needs to be. You've then got he's thrown into all these different roles. And so most people in the world, like, the most famous actors in the world is not Philip Seymour Hoffman, right? The more versatile an actor, then we don't like them as much. We like the actors who are the less versatile, right? Who are the Tom Cruise type actors, the Shah Rukh Khan type actors, right? Who play their roles pretty consistently over and over again. And so I think all of those things play a part when we're looking at someone like Rahul, and also within Indian cricket culture, the way that it is at the moment, I think it's almost built in that someone needs to be the whipping boy of each team, right? And I think we have seen that. It plays out differently in different places. I think English cricket is one where there's always a big element of who the next player is going to be dropped. And we see that play in English cricket, and that is a fairly consistent theme throughout the history of English cricket. And that has sort of ballooned into other places of like, this player should not be in that side, and so it must be their fault. So he goes from Ishant to Rahane to KL Rahul, not understanding that those players are in the side for different reasons that are developing. You look around that side and you're like, well, there are, as I said before, there are younger players coming through who could be averaging like 1 million runs at the moment. And so, you know, that all those things play a part in who he is. He's just got this sort of hang-dong nature to him, doesn't he? There is a, you know, for someone who is obviously very talented and very confident in his ability, he has this sort of gormless look about him that I think when he's failing specifically, you know, it doesn't always resonate. It doesn't look as full on. But yeah, we might actually do a feature on him today. I'll see what me and Cheyenne are thinking. It might depend on how this test goes, but we've been working on well, I should say I've been thinking about a KL piece for a while. Again, I've written so many things on him. I didn't really want to do it, but I felt like this series there was going to be something else within him that was going to, you know, that was going to happen, and it kind of has. Where are we here? Eva says Rohit and Kohli should be dropped from England series. So the thing about this is, let's say you're right. Are we really thinking that in the England series there's going to be a bunch of players who are ready to take over in that series in those conditions? So when you're talking about dropping, right? I think if they can't make the World Test Championship, we might see one of them, you know, retire from Test cricket anyway, which is very possible. You know, I've been talking about this as a series of retirements all the way through, and nothing in this series has changed my mind all that much about it, right? So I think that's a very possible thing to have happen. But I think if you're talking about dropping them, that's a very different conversation, because they are not, you know, that level of player is not particularly easy to replace, and you're sending it then in younger players. But if it's a transitional series, right, and India start to think about it from that way, then you can, you know, send over some younger players, and, you know, maybe well, Shreyas Iyer is maybe on the way out, but sorry, on the outside at the moment, but Shreyas Iyer and Sarfaraz Khan and whoever else that you would want in that sort of middle order, you know, for some of those positions, you know, maybe Shubman Gill starts opening again, so you change the top order a little bit there, you know, and look at potential number 3 and everything else. So yeah, but dropping them, I think, is a very different conversation. It's very hard to drop players of that talent. The 1,000 Great Books, I think this is about KL Rahul saying, I thought he's the next best thing when he arrives, especially with his T20 and ODI batting. He's just overshadowed, though he shouldn't be. He's the best bat in South. So I think that the next best thing is part of the issue. Jaiswal fans got really upset with me, especially over on Cricket 8 for some reason, because what I was saying is I didn't want him to make too many runs against Bangladesh and New Zealand. And I think they were like, how dare you suggest that our player is not already a great and everything. But my issue was that I didn't think he would make a lot of runs in Australia, and I didn't want him to average like 80 in those 2 series and then come over to Australia and average like 25 or 30 and everyone go through. We went through that with Prithvi Shaw, right? Went through that with Shubman Gill. Shubman Gill is a fantastic player and spent a couple of years really struggling in Test level. Babar Azam spent a couple of years really struggling in Test level. Ricky Ponting, Virat Kohli, very good players have come into Test cricket and not starred at the start. What was it, Kalasov for his first 12 or 18 games, right? These are great batters, right? And so when you get seen as the next big thing, you can't live up to those expectations because you're just a human who plays cricket, and that's the biggest problem with all this sort of stuff. So it's really tough. What else have we got here? If India get past the follow-on runs, then it will be hard to get a result from this match. I suppose that depends on exactly, you know, if let's say they get 20 past the follow-on, so Australia's 180 in front. Very easy for Australia to go out and make 200 quite quickly assuming that, the new ball doesn't ruin them. Or Bumrah to take a bunch of wickets, or Siraj to take a bunch of wickets with the new ball, and then change things quite dramatically from there. So there are still ways. It depends. It's sunny, and so we have a lot of overs left now that I thought we wouldn't get as many overs in today. So suddenly we are in a position where there's more of a chance. But yeah, it's much more likely if that's not the case. It's much more likely to be a draw than anything else. But, oh, wait, I just had the odds up. I mean, the draw was 1.27 coming into this morning, laughing at enough. Last night when I checked it, it's 1.3. So, the money has certainly been suggesting for a while that it's going to be a draw. Octagon says, in your interview with Kumar Sangakkara, he said he was constantly tinkering with the technique even during his innings. It seems like a necessary skill at the top level. It's not a necessary skill at the top level, actually. Necessary skill at the top level is to have a completely repeatable game that allows you to feel confident in yourself and to play in all sorts of different situations knowing that you can do that. When I talked to Rahul Dravid about Sachin Tendulkar changing his technique, and putting away the cover drive, he was saying that is not a normal thing. So what Kumar Sangakkara and Steve Smith and Sachin Tendulkar can do compared to a normal batter is a different level, right? And so there are players, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, would be someone like Rob Key, who didn't go on to be a success in Test cricket. I don't know what Rob would have ended up averaging. But Rob Key was someone who was constantly tinkering and would take, different guards for different kinds of bowlers in different situations and everything else. Mark Ramprakash was another player who could do that. Neither of them made runs in Test cricket, right? So there are players who have the ability, I think, to change within an innings, and there are players who don't. I've always... one of the most obvious ones for me is, and we're starting to see it a little bit more now through wobble ball, but why for 150 years have batters not changed their position on the crease? Why not bat deep in the crease for one ball and a meter outside of your crease for the next ball, right? Or change your line as well. Why not bat on leg stump for one ball and on off stump for another ball, right? And the reason is, it's actually really tough to do that. You have to readjust where you are. So let's say you're changing from off stump to leg stump. You have to, instead of automatically knowing where your stumps are, you're more conscious of it. I always felt that the best thing to do I was always taught, bat down the crease for a couple of balls. Bat deep inside your crease for one ball, and then try and pull it or cut it. And then the minute you've played the pull or the cut, you then bat 1.5 meters out of your crease next one, and you'll probably get a half volley or a fuller ball that you can punch away. So you get 2 boundaries back to back. You could do that forever as a batter, but batters don't do that. And there's a reason for that. All these changes actually are really, really tough, but there are certain players who can do that really naturally. And Steve Smith is probably the uber version of that, right? And we know that Bradman did stuff like that. George Headley did stuff like that. Obviously, Javed Miandad, Sachin Tendulkar, Kumar Sangakkara, Steve Smith, these sorts of players. And there are other players who didn't change their position on their crease for different kinds of bowlers. They didn't really change things very much at all, and they just played the way they played, and that was successful. The idea that this is what we're looking for here, Octagon, is you are looking for perfection within perfection, right? So you're just being as good as Virat Kohli has been is not enough. He now needs to find another level. That's not how these things work. I'm a Denver Nuggets fan, and I watch Russell Westbrook play, and you're just like, Russell Westbrook is an MVP level player. He is clearly really smart. He has lots of incredible drive and work ethic and everything else. But he didn't really evolve with the game. And so instead of the last 3 or 4 years, him aging gracefully, he actually aged quite badly in NBA terms, right? To the point at which the last 2 teams, maybe 3 teams he's been on, he's not been a success at all. An MVP player who's still an incredible athlete suddenly is not a success. And it's because the things that have made Russell Westbrook really good had devolved out of the game, and he wasn't, and his, even though he was still a great athlete, he wasn't the athlete he was to overcome everything anymore. And that doesn't mean that Russell Westbrook and Virat Kohli are no longer greats. It means that there are different kinds of greats and different kinds of players. Kumar Sangakkara's father, and I might have mentioned this the other day, one of the pieces we did, Kumar Sangakkara's father said that they're essentially, when he was setting his goals for Kumar, he was talking about this sort of matching the technical ability with the workability and the hand-eye coordination and everything else. And he was setting the goal of like Kumar's career should have been averaging closer to what Bradman did, because that's the combination of both. And so in Kumar's case, he didn't see any reasons why he shouldn't make runs when he was older because of the technical ability, right? I wouldn't say that players like Ricky Ponting and Virat Kohli, both of which Kumar would rate really highly, right, and does rate really highly, I wouldn't say that those guys have that same amount of technical ability. Their batting was probably a little bit more about dominance, a little bit more about there was no good length to bowl to either of those players at their peaks, and so and then their athletic ability, and then their personality and working habits and everything else come in. They might have had a lot of those other skills, and some of those other players didn't have. But when you get to the top 7 or 8 batters of all time, that what you're basically saying is, why isn't Virat Kohli someone who is able to be in the top 7 or 8 batters of all time? Well, he would love to be, right? That's what you're saying. It's very hard for that. Hi, Jarrod. Why was Australia seen to be in poor form? Were they not getting the wobble ball to do its thing just before the series? They look like monsters in the past month series. They haven't made any runs. So the bowlers, Pat Cummins had struggled a little bit with his form. So he looks a lot better now than he did before that period. And Mitchell Starc looks better now than he did a month ago, or the last time he played Test cricket. So those two have got into better form. Hazelwood had been brilliant, so there hadn't been any issue with Hazelwood. But no one was making any runs. And so if you're not making runs, your bowlers, we've seen with South Africa that like just matching a little bit of batting with their bowling suddenly makes them look like a really good Test team. Whereas for a couple of years there, it was like they're going to have to dismiss the opposition for 300 every game to have a realistic chance of winning. You're not going to do that very much. Nikon says, do you think India's batting has too many stroke players, or are they trying to counter-attack at the wrong time, or is it just a case of form, conditions, confidence? I would never worry about that sort of thing when I was picking a team. I would never go, oh, I've got too many defensive batters, or I've got too many stroke players, whatever. I would pick the best 6 batters and then try and sort the style out from there, right? So I would never be in a situation, like, I just can't see you're in a situation where you're like, oh, Shub McGill and Jaiswal and Rishabh Pant are all stroke players, so we need to find a bunch of defensive players, because chances are you're going to be picking worse defensive players around them. So I'd never look at it from that point of view. I think they clearly came out with a plan yesterday of, we're going to put pressure back on Australia, and we're going to try and score early on. The issue being is, as I said, this was a new ball wicket, and then they gave away certainly 2 wickets, and the Kohli one, there was an element of giving away, but the other 2 wickets were legitimately given away, right? And so they put themselves into a position straight away where they gave Australia a huge advantage. But I don't think that was because they had stroke players. I think that was a team-wide plan. So I probably look at it a little bit differently there. Musical Being says, Jadeja has justified his selection, much like Reddy, but they've both done it with the bat rather than ball, which is their primary duty considering their positions. Yeah, I talked about, I can't remember which podcast I was on, but I talked about Nitesh Reddy's kind of become an Ashton Agar-like figure now, where he's, they obviously thought he could bat, but his bowling isn't quite at the level they want. But because he's batting so well, it's very hard to drop him or let him go out of the side. So it's almost an issue from there. Look, I think Washington Sundar and Ashwin would also, with the wickets the way they were here, might have also made runs. Like, I don't think it's necessarily, even though I think Jadeja's batted really well. Nitesh Reddy's only just been out there for a little while, I suppose. But yes, it's caused a bit of an issue. Jadeja should be a better bowler in the 3rd and 4th innings, though, in these matches. And one of the reasons that you almost want Ashwin for the first couple of innings, and then Jadeja's batting, and then Jadeja's bowling for the end of some of these matches, the way that they play out. And unfortunately, that you can't do that. You just have to put people together, and that's how they go. Sorry. Path says, does India just simply lack a hit the deck bowler? How much would a quality back and length bowler help this attack? No, I think if you had Shami in this attack, I wouldn't say he's a hit the deck bowler. I think they'd be a better attack anyway. Yeah, you've just got to, consistently in Australia, we have seen that taller bowlers are better because in Australia, you're always getting something out of, you're always getting either a little bit of extra bounce or maybe there's a crack or there's, there might be, that ability to hit the seam. So the great West Indian attacks, the great Australian attacks, some of the, South African attacks are just more suited to these conditions than anyone else is, right? And so, but you've only got your best bowlers as they are. It's interesting that Prashid Krishna hasn't been picked, only because he does suit some of those skill sets. But they went with Harshit Rana, who was a hit the deck bowler, and I think they felt that he wasn't in their best three bowlers anymore, so they moved on. What else we got here? Ethan says, Hazelwood going off could end up hurting Australia big time. Dumb decision to play him. Look, it's what we're going to have to, when we say dumb decision to play him, if he was past fully fit, what are you supposed to do? Not play someone? Do you know what I mean, Ethan? Like I get your point, right? But I hear these comments all the time, and I'm like, they didn't rush him back because they were desperate. They, from my understanding, I'm not over there, but from talking to people around, he looked like he was fully fit. He had been tested as he was fully fit. They wouldn't have played him if they didn't think he was fully fit. And now he's not fully fit again, right? Like, what do you do? Just keep holding someone back forever? No, you play them when they're fully fit. And if they're not, you don't play them. So, there's not a lot you can do with that kind of situation. I don't think that there was if it was one of those ones, and we've seen this before, where it feels like a player is rushed back and it's a bit of a gamble. I haven't heard that at all. And that might come out, Ethan, of course. But that's not what I've heard at the moment. Hawkeye says, is it ironic that maybe that the intent bug is now a big reason why India's hitting has been poor these test series? Hitting or batting, do you mean there? I think that's just everywhere in world cricket is scoring quicker. Like Australia is the rare side here, right, of scoring slowly. Like New Zealand just beat India in India, and they had plenty of intent in their batting, and then they've gone over to play England, and that same intent has completely tanked them, right? So this isn't an India thing. Yeah, we're seeing teams score fairly quickly everywhere. There aren't many slow-scoring sides left in world cricket. There's West Indies, Australia's top order. Who else is there? I can't think of many other slower scoring sides. You've got, you've got South Africa certainly wouldn't be one. So everyone is scoring quicker, and it probably does mean that there's an element there. Where are we here? Renee says, a couple of days ago, you laughed off my comment saying Rishabh Pant has been found out. Since then, he has had yet another failure. Hypothetically, how many more innings do you might agree? It's not. He's had another failure, but you said found out. These are very different things, Renee, right? He's played some incredible innings this year. So it would be impossible for me to say he's been found out this year. He's also now got a huge body of work behind him making runs. So again, you're content that he's been found out is already being disproven by his career around the world, right? So he's not been found out. What he has is the same thing as anyone else. He's gone out. So for instance, the same bowler has got him out 3 times with a similar delivery. By your metric, that would mean that Joe Root was found out by Pat Cummins, right? Joe Root wasn't found out. He went up against a really good bowler who discovered a method against him that he could replicate, and for a while he's attacked that. It hasn't ended Joe Root's career that Pat Cummins got him out a few times in a row, has it? And it's not going to end Rishabh Pant's career that Pat Cummins has got him out a few times. You are supposed to go out to really good bowlers. And I think that the problem with what you're doing here is that you have this theory that Rishabh Pant isn't as good as he has shown so far, and so there's he's been whatever you would say lucky, or he's gotten away with it, or however you don't, and you're working back from your biases that way. Whereas actually, what you should be looking at is why has Rishabh Pant been successful so much? It's because it is precisely so hard for someone to do what Pat Cummins has done to him, which is nail him down to a spot. And for whatever reason, Pat Cummins has got the right delivery or the right pace or whatever, Pat Cummins has been able to do that. And Rishabh Pant has shown in his career so far the ability to be able to get away from that. I've been talking about Rishabh Pant being found out by people for years, and he just keeps making runs. So I'd never have a look at someone go out 3 times to a very good delivery from Pat Cummins as being found out. So I think your bigger issue is the way you're framing this, right? Rishabh Pant is going to be good for a long period of time. Is it possible that Rishabh Pant has a career like Adam Gilchrist, right? I wouldn't say Adam Gilchrist was found out, Renee, but he averages Adam Gilchrist, 60 for the first, how many test matches of his career? And then he averages 30 or 40 for the rest of his career. It's very possible that Rishabh Pant has averaged 45-ish, and then averages 35 to 38-ish from here on in. He's an attacking player who takes lots of risks, and maybe teams will work out how to bowl to him slightly better. That, again, wouldn't mean he's been found out, though. When you're talking about found out, what you were talking about is something more like the Johnny Bairstow situation, where there is a colossal flaw within Johnny Bairstow's technique that when he's not in great form can be completely exploited, and he's not going to make any runs. Doesn't mean that Johnny Bairstow didn't make runs or couldn't be confident outside of that. There were still plenty of runs to be made separate to that. So, I just think we have to be realistic with the way that we look at these things, and so far that we've not really managed to be that, to think about things that way, right? And that's a problem. So we've got the rain back. Full covers are on. Okay, so I'll probably take 1 or 2 more questions. I mean, we're here. In fact, why don't I do another 10 or 15 minutes? Keep me awake, and then then I'll decide if I'm going to do Rahul Dravid. I'm not going to do a Rahul Dravid piece today. KO Rahul piece or have a snooze. I'll have to work that out. But let's have a quick break here, and we'll be back. Thanks to everyone for popping on. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today. All right, welcome back. I just started a message and I've now completely forgotten. Oh yeah, Aniket says, what is that bat in your background? Yeah, so this is the Joker. We've done an unboxing video. I don't think we've put it up yet. So big thanks to them. So for those who don't know, I'm building a cricket net in my backyard. And I put a message out to try and get some kit for it, and help me with the synthetic. It costs a fortune, a lot more than I thought it would. I mean, the main reason that we're building out the back is to put an office to have a proper studio. So, although on nights like this I might not go out to my office, but in order so I can record properly all the way through. And Black Cat Cricket sent me this. It's a beast of a bat. It really is very, very cool. So big thanks to them, and it's worth having a look at. It's basically slightly experimental, but I think the blade is about that much shorter. So instead of like the mongoose, which is probably down to about there from my memory of the mongoose, you still feel like you have that protection when the ball is bowled short. But the bulk of the bat is in the blade, if that makes sense. It's very, very cool. Can't wait to have a hit with it. I haven't had a chance to use it yet. It's yeah, so Black Cat Cricket. I think is it written on here somewhere? Yeah, you can find it at blackcatcricket.co.uk. There you go. But big thanks to them. Can't wait to have a go at that and build my net in the back. All right. What else do we have here? Oh, sorry. Questions have just died. Eric says, looks like Siraj was injured a bit. What does bowling composition look like for India if Siraj is out of next game? I suppose Akash would take the new ball and then Prashid would come in. Siraj bowled quite well at times in this series, and his figures have been okay, but he hasn't really dominated. I almost think his rhythm has looked better than his results have. Although his results are fine. In a low-scoring series, you'd still take what he's done. But yeah, it's quite tricky for them. But as far as structurally, Eric, it doesn't matter as much, I think, because they have a new ball bowler as a backup right behind him, and then they can change that thing around from that point of view, and then bring in the taller bowler if they want. Renee says, the Gabba pitch is perfect antidote for India, I think. It brings the slips into play for the quicks, takes out the spinners, and most importantly, doesn't bring the stumps into play. Yeah, it's really interesting looking back on the fact that on day one, there was a lot of talk about not bowling at the stumps enough and everything else. And Australia has also bowled for caught behinds. The real difference in this game at the moment has probably been that when Australia hit the ball getting older and soft, they did it from a position of strength because the top order had done their job. And when India, by the time it happened, Jadeja was already in. Like even you could even argue it was still doing something when Rohit was batting, right? So it took a long time for that to happen. Like it, so a lot of things have gone, the wrong way, but they played their own part. Like you say that the pitch is an antidote for India. Well, if they hadn't have given 2 stupid wickets early on and maybe arguably a third one, they wouldn't have been in that situation anyway. Shreyan says, not super related, but what are the stats like on full tosses? I would imagine average would be higher because of more runs scored, but the strike rate will also be higher because of more outs off them. There aren't many wickets on. I've never looked at it for a test cricket, if we're being honest, but the averages are really high on full tosses in general, and the strike rates. Sorry, the economy rate, I suppose, is what you mean, is really high. So no, generally, I think there's this idea in cricket that that full tosses are actually more successful than they are. Like I've heard this a lot from people. Like every now and again, you get people say, "Oh, they should go back to the low full tosses," and it's like low full tosses actually get absolutely hammered. You occasionally you miss one, right? And knee high full tosses between knee and thigh high can sometimes cause issues. But if you watch as much cricket as I do, the vast majority of them get hit for 4 or 6, right? So you would have to even, let's say, I think it is in T20 cricket, you have an economy rate of something around 12 to 14 runs for full tosses. I think I'm right in saying that. I might have got the numbers wrong, but let's say it's 12 runs, and I've forgotten a little bit. So if you bowled 18 of them, you would be expecting 36 runs. So you need a wicket every 18 balls from a full toss. That seems pretty optimistic, especially when the vast majority of them are wide full tosses going for Yorkers that aren't going to get you wickets all that much in T20 cricket. So, and also the thing with full tosses is I do think there is a vast difference between the different kinds when it comes to wickets specifically. Like I do think you can get some wickets with the ones between your knee and your thigh. They're also the ones that probably get hit for 6s more. All right, I'll take one more here. Genius says, is there a possibility for international indoor cricket to be played? I don't know if it exists already, but it might be so much fun to do that. It does exist. I can think of 2 players who have represented their nation in outdoor and indoor cricket. Yeah, Shane Harwood and Ian O'Brien. I'm trying to think if there's any others. I might be other Kiwis, and there might be other. I don't think there's any other Australians. I'm not sure if there might be a South African as well. Yeah, so indoor cricket's really weird because I would say 90s Australia. I think it was the same in South Africa and New Zealand. It was a really popular sport. Action Indoor Centre. You played it everywhere. A lot of cricketers would play it during the winter. I would play in 3 or 4 games a day of indoor cricket. I'd play for my friend's team, and then I would get picked for the other teams as backups and stuff, and then had a senior team later on as well that I would play in. I really enjoyed it. It's very different to outdoor cricket. I've got in my office, actually, Genius, I've got a yellow indoor cricket ball, which I don't even know where I got it from, like why I have it in, anymore. But yeah, so it's a tennis ball wrapped in a leather case. It swings a lot more violently than any other cricket ball. When I played in Australia, I would generally, rather than bowl spin, I would bowl outswing. Outswing with the back of the hand slower ball. And that was really hard in the cricket to handle because you're swinging the ball away from the right-handers, and the back of the hand slower ball is bouncing up at their chins because it's a tennis ball. It's a very different kind of batting. It probably suited my batting a lot more than outdoor cricket did. But yeah, no, I really liked it. But I got injured quite a bit. It's quite bad on your knees. But yes, it does exist. It's not very big. And I think those international competitions have sort of faded away as indoor cricket hasn't been as popular as it used to be. I still find it incredible that it's not bigger in England. There's the 2 things that I've always found really weird about England is that indoor cricket is not particularly big, and the AstroTurf wickets aren't particularly big, and yet they're both bigger in places like Australia and New Zealand that don't need them as much as England does. England is so particular with their cricket, and somewhere like India, I could see it taking off as a. In fact, I saw a TikTok the other day, and I'm not sure if it was in India or it might have even been in somewhere else in the world, but I saw some competitions being played. We've seen that one was in Abu Dhabi or wherever it was, where Kevin Peterson was playing in it. You've got cage cricket in the UK coming up. With all these. The one thing that's really interesting in the UK now is all these bars that have cricket nets in them. So, cricket net /bar, bowling machines and all those sorts of things available to you. So with that in mind, I wonder if indoor cricket is a natural combination of that. Because, as I said, in the 90s, there was a bar there. You would be in a factory area, and you would have like 2 or 3 indoor cricket pitches. You'd then have indoor football. You might have basketball, netball, and then we used to have beach volleyball as well. People would play and drink, and it became a whole social thing. And also, the games only take what, hour and a half for indoor cricket. Like, they're not particularly long. Whatever, everyone gets to go. Everyone has to bowl. Everyone has to bat. All these sorts of things. Like, lots of really cool things about it. And so I'm a bit surprised that it's not as big now as it used to be. But things change, I suppose. That's it for me. Thank you very much to everyone. I will go and work out what the rest of my day is and how bad this rain is, and try and work it out there. And I'll actually just be watching the Nuggets for the next little while. But thank you very much. I will be back for a scoreboard at the end of the day if we get more play. I don't know if we will do... Oh, actually, we might do a scoreboard anyway. What time is it now? It's 4 a.m. Yeah. Let's see how we go. But yeah, we'll be back at the end of the day probably for a scoreboard. We've probably had enough cricket now and enough things to discuss without any issue there. But yes, thank you very much to everyone for your support as always and all the questions, and I'll see you again later. Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day.